Well, hello again, everyone. I'm Dennis McCarthy with Upper Allegheny Health System and Olean General Hospital, welcoming you to another edition of Inside Olean General Hospital, our news and information program. Today we have a special guest with us, and his name is Paul Green. Now, Paul is the clinical pharmacy manager with Complete RX. And Complete RX is the pharmaceutical firm and company which manages our pharmacy programs at Olean General Hospital and Bradford Regional Medical Center. And we've asked Paul to join us today to talk about a topic that I would guess he's somewhat expert at, because I've seen his talks, his public talks, and read some of his journal entries and some of the work that he's done. We're going to talk about antibiotics, and more specifically, the use, or if you want to call it, misuse of antibiotics. And first of all, Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And tell us a little bit about you and where you come from and how you got into the industry.
Sure. I was born and raised in Warren, Pennsylvania, and I live there now after going to school primarily in Erie. I did undergrad at Mercyhurst College, and then got my doctor of pharmacy from Lecom School of Pharmacy in Erie, and then residency at what's now UPMC Hammett. And after that, I did some time down in the middle of Pennsylvania at Geisinger Medical Center, and I've migrated back this way and worked at a few different hospitals around here, and have been working with Complete RX with Olean and Bradford for about the last 3 years or so.
That's great, and we're so happy to have you as a member of the team at our hospitals, because the work that you do is important, and we're gonna talk about it. So, antibiotics, kind of a subject matter that's highly talked about in the medical field, and for the general public. You know, what's happened with antibiotics? And maybe we can start by going back 30 or 40 years when they were really it, boy.
Sure.
You had antibiotics and you had a problem, gone.
Absolutely.
So what's happened?
So what's happened is that where they used to work almost all the time, and antibiotics primarily are used, actually entirely used against bacteria. So they only treat bacteria. They don't treat viruses. They don't treat fungus. As time has gone on and we've continued to use the same antibiotics over and over again, even when we're using it for appropriate things, but even more so when we're maybe using it less appropriately, the bacteria have started to get smarter. And what I mean by smarter is that they're evolving. Just like any other animal in the world, they're slowly evolving, but bacteria reproduce so quickly that their evolution can happen rapidly as well. So whereas your antibiotic would kill off the bacteria that were sensitive to it, that it was able to kill easily, it would leave behind the bacteria, even if there were just a few of them that were innately resistant to it. And it would leave those bacteria to be the ones that would then reproduce and spread. So over time, as you keep selecting naturally for the bacteria that have resistance patterns in their genetics, those become the prevalent bacteria, and your antibiotics start to be less and less effective.
So, and just to clarify, antibiotics do not take care of colds because they are viruses.
You are absolutely correct.
Okay.
The colds and the flu are both caused by viruses, so antibiotics won't help you.
So don't go rushing to the doctor if you have a runny nose and say, I need antibiotics, correct?
You are right.
Okay. So it's become, you know, you hear terms in the hospitals about antibiotics being less effective. Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the kinds of problems it causes in the hospital world, because we have to take care of patients here and we rely on medicines to help heal.
Absolutely. So there's a couple big problems that it causes. One of the first ones is that we're not able to use maybe the first line of antibiotics that we have been traditionally choosing because the bacteria are becoming more and more resistant to them. So that moves us further and further along into antibiotics that are what we refer to as broad spectrum, which means they kill off a higher bandwidth of bacteria, a lot more different kinds of bacteria. So in a perfect world, you would just take an antibiotic that only kills the specific bacteria that's causing the infection that's harming you. And you'd leave all your other bacteria that your body is filled with naturally that really do good things for you, you'd leave all those alone. So as we have to move away from those narrower, more targeted antibiotics and get broader, we run into problems because we kill off not only the bacteria that are causing the infection that's harming us, but also some of these bacteria that are good for us. What that does is leave room for some of the bad players in the bacterial world to then take over. So you get into things like Clostridium difficile or C. diff infections.
What is that?
So it's bacteria that naturally occurs in everybody's body pretty much. It's in your intestines, so in your digestive system. And in a normal, healthy person, it's just there as part of the mix of the hundreds of different bacteria that are in there helping you digest your food all the time. But it's one of the more resistant bacteria. So when you take these broad spectrum antibiotics that kill off a lot of the other good bacteria, it leaves this one alone and it starts to grow and grow and grow and reproduce. And it causes a lot of GI problems. You see amazing amounts of diarrhea and other things. It can actually cause some really bad distension of your colon, like your intestines, that can become life-threatening.
Big problem. So what are we doing in our hospitals? And I know that you've done a lot of work in this area. What's the smart way to kind of fight this battle?
So the best thing that we can do, again, is try to be as targeted as possible with our antibiotics. So we're doing cultures on everybody that comes in. So you try to figure out exactly what bacteria is causing that infection and where it is. Then once you have that bacteria identified, you can test different antibiotics against it and see what kills it. So what's it sensitive to? Then we can narrow down from those broad spectrum antibiotics that tend to cause us more problems to get as targeted as we can and kill just the bacteria we're looking to kill. So that's one of the major ways we can do it. So start broad and then narrow as soon as possible and use them for as short a duration as possible.
And there's always an issue, too, with overuse, right? I mean, you have to measure these things in the right, not only dosages, but length.
Absolutely. Length of therapy is just as important as dose in a lot of different situations. So there's certain bacterial infections, some kind of really simple UTIs, urinary tract infections, that you can treat in as few as 3 days. There's different types of infections in the bones, like one called osteomyelitis, that you might need weeks of therapy for. But you need to be able to look at those and see when you need what length of therapy. So if somebody has one of these simple UTIs, it can be 3 days, leave them on antibiotics for 2 or 3 weeks to make sure it's really killed is detrimental because it's going to keep killing off more and more of the bacteria that we actually need.
The good, what we call good bacteria.
Absolutely.
So this whole idea, people sometimes say, well, I need to grab some antibiotics, and their son has part of his dose left from something that he had, and you just grab that. That's not only probably a good idea, it may be dangerous.
Absolutely dangerous. Okay. So there's certain antibiotics that are better at treating different infections. So just because you might have had an antibiotic left over, which you shouldn't do, because if you get prescribed a certain duration of antibiotics, you got to finish the course. So that's the other big important thing is if you're prescribed 5 days of an antibiotic, even if you're feeling better after 3, take the whole 5, because the bacteria that get killed on the back end are the ones that are going to be the more resistant ones. So it kills off the easy ones first, and the worse and worse resistant ones you get at the end. So if you leave those alone by stopping early, your resistance is going to increase.
So there's a message. Don't use somebody else's antibiotics. And if you do have your own antibiotics that are prescribed by your doctor, use the whole dosage. You're going to feel better after 2 or 3 days. But if it says 10 days, stay on it.
You got it.
Stay on it. So the whole issue is, we talked about we went back, we looked at the beginning when it was relatively easy, right? Mm-hmm. To eliminate this problem, and then it almost sounds like exponentially it's getting more difficult. What's going to happen as we go forward? What's going on inside the pharmaceutical business or the pharmacy industry that's, well, this isn't going to get easier, it might get harder?
It is. So as much as we would hope that the pharmaceutical companies could just create new antibiotics to treat these new resistant bacteria, it's really harder to do than you would think for a lot of different reasons. So one of them is that it takes a long time to develop antibiotics, sometimes up to a decade of research that has to be done to get it specific for the bacteria you're trying to kill so you don't have as many adverse effects or kill off good bacteria and that sort of thing that we've already talked about.
Right.
But also you need to go through all the testing, and the other thing is that it all takes an incredible amount of money. So the good example that I think of is if you think about the way you take an antibiotic, usually you only take it for a week or 2. Okay, so correct. That drug company is only getting that week or 2 worth of sales to you, as opposed to something like a blood pressure medicine or something for diabetes that primarily, if you get started on it, you're going to be on it for a good part of your life, yes, which is years. So they have all that extra time to recoup that investment that they did in their research. So that kind of is skewing the drug companies' interest in making more antibiotics. The FDA is doing a really good job of trying to incentivize them. A decade or so ago, they had put out a challenge to all the big drug companies to create 20 new antibiotics by the year 2020. We're not going to quite make it, but as we get closer and closer, you do see more coming out. In the 80s, we were putting out probably 3 or 4 new antibiotics a year. Now we, for the last 5 or so years, have been down to about 1 every other year, but it's ticking up. So we've had quite a few come out in just the last year or two, a good handful.
So it's actually you're trying to outmaneuver the bacteria.
Absolutely.
It feels like kind of a battle, you know, with relative to the idea that, you know, you got this army of bacteria out there, and you've got these antibiotics, and you got to be smarter to be able to get the job done.
Absolutely, yeah. They've been winning for a long time, so now we've got
It sounds like it. So what have we left out? What would be something else that you'd want to leave with the public as we talk about this problem?
I think one of the biggest things is when you go to your doctor's office, try to understand that sometimes it's okay to leave without a prescription for anything.
Yep.
Even if, you know, you might think you have some sort of infection. A lot of times those are, like we talked about, caused by viruses, or there's some that are, you know, considered what we call self-limiting. Means if you give it a few days and just kind of rest and take it easy, they'll go away on their own and don't need treatment. So the more we can only properly use antibiotics for the times and cases when we do actually need them, that's going to be better for everyone in the end.
You know, as you say, if people go to your doctor if you don't leave with something, you feel like, why did I bother going? But I think and are you finding that the medical community is starting to pay more attention to this issue?
They're trying. I mean, the studies that have been done in the last few years have shown that if more and more people are going and asking for something, and the providers are giving in, even if they know it's not the right thing to do. But that's why we're doing more and more trying to educate people about the dangers of that on both the medical provider end and the general public end, so we can try and combat it.
And here in the hospital, I think we've found some effectiveness with some of the work that you're doing in trying to really target, measure, appropriate dosage, to be able to help people get in and out of the hospital better and safer, correct?
Absolutely. So we do a ton of trying to be as specific as we can to cut down on those nasty side effects and super infections.
That's great. Anything else? Anything we missed?
I don't think so. I think we got a lot.
Well, Paul, thank you for being with us. And if you'd like to know more about this subject, you can visit us online at www.ogh.org. And Paul also recently did a TED Talk?
I did.
He did, and we're going to leave you that at the bottom of the screen at the end of our show. If you'd like to click on that, you'll see Paul on stage giving a great presentation on this subject and goes a lot more in depth. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.